Hey neighbor, today is April 10th. We're getting into onion harvest time. What a better time to talk about onion harvest and onion storage tips. We're going to be looking at 3 different scenarios today: raised bed onions, container grown onions, and lastly, in-ground grown onions. And yes, I have grown the best crop of onions I've ever grown before, and they are huge. And we're going to talk about all that, give you some good information today so you could be successful growing onions as well. So this is Mama Hoss's raised bed. Now this is not a huge raised bed, but she does have it lined with rock, and we put some pot soil in here, so it is technically a raised bed. But also what we're going to talk about within these 3 strategies, we're going to look at 3 different types of growers that's growing these onions here. Maybe give you some tips and interesting takeaways of how the onions grew with the type grower. Now Mama Hoss is what I consider a pretty good gardener. She's never grown a lot of onions before, and she probably didn't stick to near the schedule of what I do. But she did a good job of growing these onions in the raised bed this year. Now the soil in here was amended, it's good soil, and she's got drip irrigation in here as well. So taking consideration, she probably kept these things watered better than the average person that didn't have an irrigation system, because it is more convenient when you have that drip irrigation to water than if you're hand watered. So I think she did a pretty good job growing these onions as far as her schedule was. I did come in here and do the last application for her of the calcium nitrate, but she pretty much did everything else. And I'm pretty sure she didn't stick to the schedule I did, but she did a good job. Now you see here, she's got 3 onions already laying over here. Now the rule of thumb on onions when to harvest them is when 30 to 50% of your onions lay over, just like this right here. But we got to take all this with a grain of salt, because weather comes into a factor also. First of all, let's talk about ideal conditions. So ideally, when 30 to 50% of these onions are laying over, it is time to come in here and harvest them. Just like that right there. Now these are the Vidors. She's got some red Creole on the end that's not ready yet because it's a later maturing variety, but her Vidors are getting ready here. So we can see here, it's a pretty good size onion here. And look here folks, I'm gonna brag on the Vidor again. I think it is the best onion variety for us Southerners to grow because it's easy to grow. So we pull these onions up, and if we have good weather, what we wanna do is we want to leave these things on top of the ground and let them dry, or as the professionals call it, let them cure out. We're going to let them lay out there as long as we can when we have good, sunshiny, warm weather. So if we happen to have 4 or 5 days of good, warm weather with no rain, you can let them lay out here and let them dry. I talked to a commercial onion grower this morning, and they have these commercial dryers and all this kind of fancy equipment, but he told me this right here. He said the best onion is cured by the sun. That makes plenty of sense, don't it? So we can leave these out here and let them cure. That's the best thing. When those tops start drying back, some and turning brown, we know they're curing out. Now, if we start getting any kind of bad weather, we got any chance of rain, we don't want them to get wet, because if they get wet, they can mold and they can not store near as well. So ideally, you could probably leave them out here a good 10 days if your weather was perfect and warm, and let them cure out. Normally, I don't do that. Probably a couple of days is all I really got in me to leave them out there, because I don't want them to get wet at all. And this time of year, our weather can be a little unpredictable, but kind of gives you an idea on what the cured of leaving them lay out here. Leave them laying as long as you can, as long as you got good weather. But if you got any bad weather or any hint of it, do not let them get rained on. So I'm assuming she's probably going to pull these onions in the next day or 2. I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of these that's already laid over right there and get them laying on top of the ground there. Now this is a little bit of a shady spot, so they're not going to dry out as well as they would in full sun, but it's definitely time to get started on them. So this is my neighbor right down the road, and they grow their onions in these totes that they cut off here. A lot of people use these things right here for container gardening. And these onions right here have done okay. They've been gardening for probably about 2 to 3 years now, so I don't know if I would classify them as beginner gardeners, but maybe intermediate gardeners. These totes right here, they had good soil in them, good compost mixed in there. They did not have irrigation, so they had to hand water these onions here. Also, they didn't follow near as strict as fertilization schedule as what I did. I know that. So we didn't get quite as big of onions, and they have matured out and ready to harvest a little bit quicker. You can see here, most of these onions are laying over right here. Now is the time to get these out of here. We just had a big storm 3 or 4 days ago, and it seemed to really finish them off. But they're laying over right now, and they need to be gotten up. So what I would do is come in here and harvest them and lay them up and let them cure next few days. And I'm going to show you the size of onion they grew. Now this is the Vidora as well. And all these onions I'm showing you today was planted around the right time, around the 20th of November. You see that size onion right there? There's nothing wrong with that. That's a decent sized onion. It's not near as large as what I grow, but it's a pretty good sized onion. And my point is, they were pretty dead-gum successful growing these onions, even under adverse conditions. Now, we know these things didn't get the moisture they probably needed. Look at that soil there, right there. You see it's dry? They had to hand water them. And anytime you have to hand water a container or a raised bed, you normally don't do it enough, because you know what? Life gets in the way and we can't come out here and do it as it needs. If you had an automatic irrigation system in here, it would probably have bigger onions because it got more water when it needed it. Also, following a stricter fertilizer schedule would help as well. Irrigation is probably the most important, but fertilizer is the second most important. If you put those things together, you're going to get a bigger, probably a little bit better onion. Not bad at all. I want to show you this right here. It's probably the biggest one in this container right here. Look at there, a decent sized onion here. These Vidoras perform well with pretty much any type gardener. So that's what I love about it, easy to grow. Now this is my plot, which is in ground. I got drip irrigation on them. I followed a strict schedule on fertilization of them. I think I've done everything as perfect as I can. Now, I've not always been the best onion grower that's ever been, but the last few years I've kind of perfected and I've got better and better, and this is the best crop I've ever grown here. I think it's for sticking to the rules of engagement right. So I've got 3 different varieties growing here. Well, the last 2 I showed you was just one variety, which is the Vidora. Now, Vidora is an early maturing short day. So it's going to be one of the first short day onions that comes off, and that's wonderful. We love that, but we have to take in mind on these Texas 1015s and my red Creoles, they're a little later maturing, so we're not going to harvest them, or they're not going to be ready to harvest at the same time our early maturing type is. Just because they're all short day types doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to mature out at the same time. There's actually several different varieties that mature out quicker. Some of them don't mature out till on into May. I think for the home gardener, these early maturing varieties are the best because they're easier to grow than these longer maturing short day varieties. That's the reason I like the ones that I've mentioned here today. Red Creole, probably not one of my favorites on the reds. We may switch to that next year to another variety. I think there's probably better reds out there than Red Creole. I want to do that one this year because it does have a spicy flavor to it that a lot of people love. But this Vidora, this Texas 15 are good varieties. I'm probably not giving Texas 1015 enough credit, but it is a little later maturing. I'm starting to see some good sized bulbs on them now. Saying all that, I expect to harvest my Vidoras a little bit, maybe a week before I do my Texas 15s, and maybe 2 weeks before I do my Red Creoles. So watching what type of onion you got, when to harvest is going to make a difference. Now, none of my tops have fell over yet. And all of these onions I've showed you today were planted around the same time, around the 15th, 20th of November. I think it's the reason the onions hadn't stressed any. We ain't seen very little bolting this year on any onions. I hadn't seen any of mine. So I think that's a testament that they hadn't stressed any. But folks, I got some onions so big here today, I just don't think they can get any bigger. So we're going to dig a couple or 3 of these today just to show you how big they are and show you how we store them. And I am just amazed at the size of these onions. So the necks are getting just a little bit soft on these, but none of them have fell over yet. That there is pretty close. So if I had a bad storm or several days of rain coming in, I would go ahead and harvest these onions. Because folks, I just don't think I'm gonna get much prettier onion than that is right there. So I would definitely take weather into consideration there. If I got sunshiny days, I'm gonna probably leave them for a few more days because our weather looks pretty good. But always keep in mind, we got to watch the weather when it comes to onion harvesting time because we don't want them to get wet. But ideally, we want to harvest these, lay them up, let them cure in the sun 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days at the most. Then we'll start seeing brown. All this will be turning brown. Now what we want to do when we come out here and all that is brown and our onions are cured is we want to take our knife and we want to cut them off about right here. That's what I like to carry to the barn for storage. We got a little bit of neck on it there, and that's going to continue to dry down there. It's not going to let moisture get into our onion and rot. So that's the way I like to carry them to the barn to put them in the rack for storing. In the past, what I've done underneath my dirt barn is I would spread out my onions where they didn't touch for storage. And it's worked fine for a long time. I can't tell you how many years I've done that. I got a barn here that works perfect for that. This year I want to step my game up a little bit. I had cleaned my barn out trying to get more organized or better organized and take more advantage of my space. And I bought these wire racks right here that I'm gonna start using for my storage for my onions and potatoes because I can put a lot more in a small area here. Now I went back and forth for a pretty good while trying to figure out exactly how I want to do this, and there's several different things you can do. I've seen people on the internet build their own using lumber and wire, and that's certainly an option. I opted to go with these stainless steel wire racks because I think this is the best scenario you can go with. They can be kind of pricey. So if you ever get an opportunity to get some of these things used or at a surplus store or something like that, I think it's a great option. The downside is they can be expensive. These right here I think are 36 inches wide. Most of the ones are 24 inches wide, which is fine. I just got the 36 inch because I'm trying to get the most out of a small space that I can. And these things have these, all this air in here. We don't have to worry about the wood holding any moisture there. So this stainless steel is perfect right here. Now what I'm going to do, just to show you, because I've not harvested mine yet, is I will come in here and I will space. I got nested onions up here. We're going to do it basically the same way, but we'll take these onions and kind of space them in there like that right there. We really don't want them touching, or we don't want them stacked up. If they touch a little bit, it's okay, but we don't want them stacked. We want a single layer. We've took the tops off these because the tops don't serve any purpose now. And plus it's going to give us a lot more room. We don't have to worry about those tops taking up room on our nice racks. So we'll space these out on there, and hopefully this is going to help me have a lot more storage space for my onions and my potatoes and do a better job. Now if I got one downside in here, I don't have the air circulation that I really would like. But you want these storage racks or whatever you do, you want them out of direct sunlight so they don't get sun, and you don't want them so when it rains or you have those big bad storms, rain can blow underneath that. So I've got this on the back side of my barn here, never gets wet back here. My soil is built up a little bit so I don't have to worry about standing water in here. The only downside is I wish I had a little bit more air circulation, but you kind of got to find a good happy medium there so you got enough air circulation, but you keep them out of the bad storms and you keep them out of the direct sunlight. And for me, I think this is going to work pretty good. I may at some point put me a fan back here on, but I really don't want to have to go through that and pay that electricity for that. So I'm going to try this first. I got a feeling it's going to work fine for us. So let's recap. Under ideal conditions, we want 30 to 50% of those tops folded over before we start harvesting. We want to pull them up, lay them on top of the ground, and let the sun bake them out and cure them for 3 to 5, maybe even 10 days if we got great weather. The main thing, folks, is don't let them get wet. If we have to harvest them before 30 to 50% of the tops lay over, and we have to let them just cure for 1 day to keep them from getting wet, you're a lot better off to do that than you are to let them get wet. Second of all, understand if you've got more than one variety, it could have a different days to maturity, or they can become ready to harvest at different times. So don't think that they're all going to be ready at the same time. This by-door variety here is probably the earliest variety I know of as far as the sweet onion there, but they're going to be others that it's going to be a week to 2 weeks, maybe even longer than that before they're ready to harvest. So let's don't get caught up in having to harvest them all at one time. Another thing as far as storage and your onions storing better, let's do a late calcium application late in the game. Now here we are, April 10th. I hit these onions with calcium nitrate at the end of February. Calcium, we know, helps that onion store longer. So we want to get some calcium inside of that onion before we quit fertilizing. A late February, 1st of March calcium nitrate application is going to give that onion some nitrogen to finish off, because we don't like to fertilize that last 30 days but also it's going to get some calcium in that onion to build that cell wall structure, and we know onions store better if they got some calcium in them. All right, and last, let's make sure we got good storage conditions where they won't get wet at all. Make sure that if we put them on the ground that we won't have rainwater coming in there. It's good high ground. If we're putting them on shelves, we're not going to have any blowing rain come in there. We want good shady conditions there where the sunlight don't hit them and where we got good air circulation. We do all those things right there. We grow us off a nice crop of onions, and man, you're going to have onions store all the way into fall. It's one of the great things we love and enjoy about growing onions is we don't have to go to the grocery store, go to the barn, grab us some onions anytime we want them. It's a huge rewarding experience there, and I think it'll be nice for you to be able to grow your own onions and have them anytime you want them.